Hi, I'm Kathy Moore, and this is Steps in a Journey. We have been, this is a class on the spiritual life, life in the spirit class. And it's addressed mainly to people in the prayer ministry, so it's been on prayer ever since we've started this class, since COVID started, when we went on Zoom. So, we've been giving a lot of talks on prayer, and then we went into the book Spiritual Combat by Dom Lorenzo Scupoli. And we're just about finished. This program here is going to be the last one on this book as we cover the last few pages of it. And I hope you've enjoyed the series. Next week we're going to go into Confessions by St. Augustine. I'm sorry that we are not going to start at the beginning of the book. This is a book that we were reading in class before COVID hit and before we went on Zoom. And since there's different people on Zoom, I didn't want to start over from the beginning because we're halfway through it. And so I just have done this other thing on prayer and this book on spiritual combat. But most of the people on Zoom were in the classes, and they would like to continue on with the book Confessions. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to start where we left off, in which is book 7 at age 30 for next week's Zoom class on Steps in a Journey. And this is the book that we will be using. Different confessions, different publishers, different translators, but this is what we'll be using. I picked up this book when we first started a couple of years ago. It's a really nice leather-bound book that I got at half price for the members of the class. But in the Spiritual Combat by Dom Lorenzo Scupoli, I thought that we would finish last week, but then I saw that every chapter is interesting to me, including the end of the book. And we discussed all 4 weapons that he said that we have of fighting the evil one who wants to draw us away from Jesus. and that is that we are nothing. That knowledge is that we can do nothing. We can pray, but we cannot heal. Otherwise, if it was our way, everyone would be healed. But it's not. It's God heals. And it's His reason why the person is healed or not. It's His way, not ours. And the third is weapon we have is our own body, our virtues, our passions, our desires. We use those to grow in and fight the evil one. Meditations, fastings, penances, these are things that we can do to fight the evil one. And the last one was prayer. Everything works through prayer. It is through prayer that we recognize that we are nothing. It is through prayer that we recognize that God is everything. And it is through prayer that we ask for growth in the virtues. So he said, but there is another weapon that we can use, and that is receiving Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. It is, then we receive Him, body, blood, soul, and divinity. He comes within us, and He can strengthen us and we become one with him, so that when we suffer, he is suffering within us. So so the first four methods are God is using us, and we use God or depend on God to fight the enemy. But when we receive the Eucharist, he is within us to fight the enemy. And by eating the body of Jesus and drinking his blood, we dwell in him and he in us. We may eat his body and drink his blood in reality every day, and spiritually every hour. And during COVID, that's what we've had to do. We've had to receive him spiritually, and that's what this book is pointing out. Way back in the 1500s, the value of a spiritual communion, not just once a day, but every hour he recommends it, because it is profitable and holy. And we should practice it as often as we can. And he talks about the manner in which we should receive communion. And most of us know this, but there might be some people watching this on YouTube that has never received communion. But we should think about our motives of receiving communion before communion, while receiving communion, and also after communion. So before communion, and this is the night before and that morning of receiving it, think about these things. One, if we're stained with mortal sin, to cleanse ourselves in the sacrament of penance before receiving communion. And with a sincere heart, give yourself to Jesus. Consecrate your souls and all your faculties to his service. Because in this sacrament, he bestows on mankind his body, blood, soul, and divinity, together with the immense and inexhaustible treasure of his infinite merits. You receive all this when you receive communion. And as all of our gifts to him are insignificant to his gifts to us, we should desire nothing less than the totality of all the merits that he has, and he's willing to give to created beings, and thank him for it. If our desire is victory over our spiritual adversaries, meditate for some time before receiving communion on the desire that God has of coming into us. Just meditate on that. God desires to be within us. So think of two things. The joy that God has in dwelling within his human subjects. He calls it his delight. And dwell on this, the utter hatred he has of mortal sin, because mortal sin takes us away from him. It's an obstacle of his union with us. It's an obstacle of our receiving the graces that he wants to give us. And that's why it's called mortal, is because we're disconnected from God when we commit a mortal sin. God is all good. His light is undimmed. And he is all beauty. He hates sin. Sin is all malice, all darkness, all corruption. So burning indeed is the hatred of God for sins that the entire dispensation of the Old and New Testaments have been ordained for the destruction of mortal sins. Read the Bible, and it tells you how to live a pure and holy life. And the saints have said that the divinity would have suffered through 1,000 Golgothas, 1,000 passions of the cross, just to annihilate sin within the human being. So think about this before receiving communion, is how much he loves us. He loves us so much that he gave his only begotten Son so that we might have life and have it abundantly. Okay, when we're about to receive the body of our Lord, let us quickly consider the faults committed since our last communion, and in order to conceive a more perfect sorrow, let us remember that we committed them as callously as if Christ had not died for us on Calvary. So we should be filled with shame and fear for having basely preferred a trifling compliance to our own will to the obedience due to so gracious a master. But when we consider that in spite of this ingratitude and infidelity, this God of all charity condescends to visit us and live within us, then let us approach him with confidence and open hearts. For when he lives within, no tainted affections of the world may steal in. And receive him with all your love. And after communion, just adore God. Adore him with great humility and saying within our souls, Thou seest, O God of my soul, my wretched propensity to sin. You see, dear Lord, how domineering my passion is, and I cannot resist it. Dear Lord, help me fight my battles. And if I share in the combat, it is Thee from whom I must expect the crown of victory. Then, addressing ourselves to the Eternal Father, let us offer him our beloved Son, who now dwells within our breasts. Let us offer him thanks for the innumerable benefits and implore him for the grace that will be our victory completely. And then finally resolve to fight courageously against the enemy from whom we suffer the most. Thus we may expect victory, since if we're not wanting in petition, God is not wanting in bestowing. So the more you petition the Lord, He will answer your prayers. He will take care of you. And sooner or later, victory will be ours. Sometimes in our prayer life, we experience dryness. And he talks about this dryness, desolation, many of us first got into the charismatic movement, or first began our love for God by feeling His love for us. It was a feeling that we received. We were just wrapped in His love. And so this is a sensible devotion. But we have to be, the saints have all warned us that we have to be careful of where this feeling comes from. One, it could be from the devil. Two, it could be an influx of grace given to us by God. But we have to know which one it is. And we follow by the fruits. As you study the effects of this feelings of warm fuzzies that you feel. What are the effects on you? Is it changing you? That's how you can tell whether it is from the devil, nature, or grace. But if you feel nothing, and a lot of people love the Lord without ever feeling anything, and blessed are those who have not touched or seen Jesus and yet believe. And these people who are in this way, they want to please the Lord, and they're attached to God alone. And they are seeking to just obey His dictates without any other reason. And this is what God wants. This dryness or spiritual aridity could become from several causes. One, from the devil. He can take away whatever he will do something to cause us to neglect God. He will lead us away from the path of perfection and plunge us anew into the world. And also, we could have dryness from our own neglect, our own faults, and again, earthly attachments. But if it's from divine grace that we have this dryness, that we don't feel anything, it is weaning. God is weaning us away from wanting the presence He gives us, rather than loving Him, the guy who gives the presents. I shouldn't call God Guy. But God gives us the graces. And we should love Him whether He's going to give us a present or not. And He might take away the feeling of His presence to teach us to esteem His gifts more in the future. And that's what they've been talking about during COVID. Well, you can't receive the sacraments, so therefore in the future you should esteem them all the more. He brings us the dryness so that we desire Him all the more. And we want to be more closely united with Him. And maybe we are given this dryness because God takes delight in our struggle and our strength and our desire growing to be with Him all the more. So if you experience this dryness, know that it's not necessarily any fault of your own. And if it is a fault, amend it. If you're slipping into sin or into craving the world instead of God, notice it in your prayers for the evening. And so I wanted to point out these things before we finish this book, is the importance of spiritual communion. Because, these are the things I'm learning myself, is way back in the 1500s they had this spiritual communion. And it wasn't something new that they invented for COVID. But to do it every hour, not just once a day, but say the spiritual communion prayer every hour. And sometimes it's even more beneficial than receiving communion, because we might receive communion without being prepared, and just because everybody's going up to receive it, so we do too, without even thinking of God. And receiving a spiritual communion at home, thinking of God and saying the prayer from your heart, might be more beneficial than receiving his body, blood, soul, and divinity in a lackadaisical manner. So this is a wonderful, wonderful book. Try to get it on your own and read it. And grow in your love for God. And remember that St. Francis de Sales carried this in his pocket. This was his golden book. He called it a spiritual guide, and I'm sure that his introduction to the devout life has many of the same things in it, although I haven't compared the two. So, thank you, and we'll see you next week, and we'll talk about confessions. God bless you.